Okay, so let me show you how to get started with this assignment in 3D Studio Max. For this assignment, I'm more concerned about the materials and lights. Okay, so it's a simple assignment to just kind of get you started on the basics of materials and lighting, but some of you might be beyond that at this point, so that's okay. The first thing we're going to do is create the floor, right? The assignment calls for a floor plane, so I'm going to go standard primitives, plane, and then click and drag, make a plane. Okay, I'm going to add a few more segments to this, maybe 10 by 10, and then enter. Okay, the idea is that when we go edit it next, we can actually do this in a different way, and there's different ways you can do this. The simplest way for me is to right click and convert to editable poly, and over there you got the vertex, which you can access there or here, and on there you can then now start moving points. Okay, notice how as I move these the vertices are responding very very sharp. So let's go to to the modify. Okay, where's this section? Use NURMS subdivision. Okay, you can over there change that setting, and you see it's gonna start making the geometry a little bit softer. Okay, that's one way to do this. Okay, so that way you can do the the different bumps that the assignment kind of mentions there. The other thing that it might be actually one of the most complex things, it will be the wall. Okay, so let's create the wall with a box, simple box, and I'm using segments of 2 segments there. You can increase that, maybe 3. Okay, and then I'm going to do this, use the same technique that I used before. I'm going to right click, convert to editable poly. And what I'm going to do next is grab a polygon over here on the side to make that L shape that the assignment mentions. Okay, and we're going to use the extrude tool, which is, I keep doing that, gotta click here and then scroll. The extrude tool is at the top, somewhere here. It's hiding from me. Extrude, right here. So let's click on it and just click and drag. It's as simple as that. Click and drag, click and drag. You might want to do it 2 times because you have 2 faces here with and so it's kind of like making it a little bit more even. So I'm hitting Control R to kind of rotate and middle mouse. So that's your L shape. You can make it thinner if you want. You can right click. Well, we already converted it to polygon, so you could modify. If you think that it's too thick, you can even go it's as simple as moving those points, and this will be one of many ways you can do that. And the other thing is to do the opening, right? The assignment mentions an opening, so I'm gonna go here, create a box. I'm gonna make it long enough so that it goes through the wall, and so that it resembles a window, right? So I'm gonna just kind of move it down with my move tool, down, and relocate it with the move tool. And you can place it wherever you would like. I'm just gonna put it there. Make sure it goes through, right, to the other side. And what I'm going to do is use the Boolean option. Okay, so where is that? It's on the compound objects over here, and then I'm on the main menu here in the create, and I'm going to use Boolean. Okay, then I'm going to tell it which side, which geometries I want to operate on. So I'm going to go add operands, and I'm going to click on the wall. Okay, excuse me. Once you do that, you're going to tell it here what is it that you want to do. We're going to use a subtract, okay? But in this case, it's subtracting the wrong item. It's subtracting the wall from the other object that I have. So if that happens, just go and change the order here of the operands. And that should have done it. And subtract. Okay, not working. We want box 1 at the top. Not union, subtract. Oh, there you go. Box 1 on the top, box 2, and subtract. Okay, so order of is relevant. So if you have a problem like I did, just keep switching these two guys, and whatever is on the top, just move it at the bottom, and that way it removes that. So that's done. It's as easy as that to do the wall. And then you had a table too, right? So for the table you could very much use maybe a what could we use? We could use one of those, or extended primitives. We could use a simple cylinder, and you could do the top of the cylinder there, and you can scale it if you need to, with these tools, and I think you guys already know how to do that. And to do the base, you could make a cylinder that is long enough, and you can do something as simple as convert to editable poly and go on vertex mode, and simply start moving points. Maybe you want this part to be the base, so you can do something like that, and maybe you want this part to be a little bit more narrow, so you can do something like that. Okay, so and then you put the top there at the other part. You may need to scale this. I think you already know how to do that, right? Oops, I hit isolated, sorry about that. So you don't need to really spend too much time on this. This is mostly for practice. Now let me just put it over so that you have the idea, you see it. So I'm doing the move tool and scale tool here. Okay, okay, and you might want to do this on the top view, probably with wireframe mode added. Oops, excuse me. So that you can see here, you see how much better it is here to center it, so that way the center of that top part is at the center of that cylinder base. And that's it. That's that's good enough. The other thing is the egg shape, right? So you could simply maybe make a sphere, and doing the same, using the same technique of, let's move it up. Now we're having some shifting on the display. You could use, I don't know if you knew about the squash tool. That the squash tool is pretty useful for things like this. You can quickly do that, and then right click, convert to editable poly, and maybe you want to scale instead of squash the bottom to I'm gonna right click, go isolate, so that I don't have, so I had the, so that is just on focus, everything else goes away. You could then maybe select in a more direct side view, maybe squash it a little bit, or maybe you want to make the bottom a little wider. try using the same technique that we used before with NURBS subdivision. Okay, and you can use where is select. Self-select is somewhere here to hide it from me. There it is. Self-selection is a great tool for this. You see how this kind of here creates a little bit too much of a bump. You could, let me first show you what it does. Let's say that I want to move 1 point, okay, and self-select is off. Okay, let's first see what happens there. If I want to move 1 point, notice how, let me turn off the smooth so that you can see the changes. Let me turn this off. Use NURBS subdivision. So notice how it's very sharp, right? And you could do this. Let me show you. Right click and isolate. You could, this we did with the ground, right? Remember we did this with the ground. We kind of started moving points, but let's use the let me show you what the soft selection does. Let me turn NURBS subdivision off, and let me show you the difference here with, let's say, this point over here using smooth soft selection. I'm sorry, using soft selection. So let me scroll up and then use soft selection to on. If I try to move that point, notice that before it was a big spike, right? It creates a very sharp point, but now as I move the point with using soft selection on, it tends to drag points on the side. Notice how it did. So it starts smoothing that transition rather than making it sharp. Let me show you on the egg shape. So I'm gonna go isolate selection again, with the egg shape selected. So let's click on the egg, right click, isolate selection. So let me show you what happens there if we apply that same technique to using soft selection. Remember, we move this vertex and it looks very sharp. Now I'm gonna turn soft selection to on, okay, and I think we need to decrease it to maybe 10. Let's see if 10 works better. No, 5. Okay, the spread, and what I'm seeing is that the spread of the tool is very, very high, so it's gonna probably not work well. There you go. You see, it's now I'm pulling only one vertex, just like I did here, but this time I have soft selection on and fall off of 5, so it kind of pulls things, vertices around it. Notice how now it's much smoother rather than a sharp point over here. Okay, so you could use that for your egg character. You could select, the top or so, and then using soft selection you can pull it and create a smooth transition on it. And it also works with scaling as well, you see. Okay, so something to think about, soft selection or using the other method that I showed you on the and isolate on the plane. Okay, the next part is using materials, and some of you are already familiar with that from the previous class with the mausoleum. But in case you haven't, let's press M to open the material editor, M for material. And what you can do is a standard material. It's right here. So double click on that. And what you can do is, let's say that we apply it to the floor. So first click on the floor, and on the material, move the mouse on the material and right click and go assign material to selection. Okay, left click. And notice how the material is gray and now the floor is gray. Okay, so I'm gonna click on the material on the title over here, and that's gonna open the settings on the right side of that material editor. On the color, the changes on the color are on the diffuse attribute, and that comes from diffusing light. Think about it that way. Color is the way that that light reflects on a surface, whether it is absorbing or diffusing, you know, reds and or, you know, different tones of colors. Black is the absence of light, right? And white is all the colors combined. So you can see it as diffusing color, or diffusing light, the way it diffuses light. Okay, so let's go double click on, or just click there on the diffuse and click another color. Notice how as we change, the color of on floor plane also changes according to what we select. Okay, you say okay to just apply that. If you did want to apply, let's say, a texture, you can go here on that little checkbox, and you can either add checker map, or if you want to add your own texture, you go here on bitmap and just find it, you know, just find the texture over there, and that will give you a you know, assign the texture that you apply there to the floor. Okay, so then the next thing that you have is to create a light. Okay, so you can do go through the main menu here, create light. You can start with standard lights if you have never used anything, and I want to go to the target spotlight, and I'm going to click and drag. The reason I click and drag is because first I create the light, and then as I drag I create the spotlight. Okay, I mean I create the aim. This type of spotlight allows you to move the light, and it keeps looking at the same place, and I like that this type of light for that reason. It allows you to also move and also key the aim of the light. You see the direction where the light is looking at, then that will be useful later on. So let's see, let me see, display. Let's make a quick render, and let's see how this looks. Okay, this is the little one with the light there, or this one here, render frame window. Okay, so it's kind of far, so we can just, you know, kind of zoom in. It will look slightly different. Somebody was mentioning that, you know, things look very different on the viewport than on the, because it is it does a normal thing, so don't worry about it. Notice the final render is what tells you once the materials and everything's applied. The final render is the one that's going to show you how everything will look. Notice how my scene doesn't have shadows. Okay, this part here is in shadows, so I don't want you to confuse the area of coverage of the spotlight with the shadows. Okay, this is pretty much the light, the light not covering this right side of the scene. So the way you can do that, fix that, is to come over here on the modify tab with your light selected, and on the parameters here, just widen that hotspot beam. See how the light is getting wider? Notice how now that when we render, that dark part will disappear. You see, it's getting better, you know, it's not disappearing entirely. So let's keep increasing it, and actually the light is very, very close to that edge, so we might need to even move it back even further. That might be a better solution. So let's see. You see now the whole scene, except this little corner here, is covered. But that should not be, you know, this indication here of shadows is not necessarily a shadow. Notice how things don't look like they are touching ground or anything like that. The next step I want you to look at, and let's go over here and select the light, not the target, but the light itself, is the shadows to turn them on, okay, in this part over here. That's what, you know, the default setting is off, so that's what many students miss on this assignment. So render it, and now you're starting to see actual shadows on the scene. You see, now you see this in darkness over there. It's probably because it's hidden by this little lump of ground that I created there. Okay, so let me rotate. I use a lot Control R, and what we could do is maybe get just move that light. I'm sorry, my computer is starting to overheat. Plus MAAA is in the background as well. So I'm gonna just move that light a little bit lighter, higher, and just move over here and render again. Let's render. Where's my render window? Nope, that's not it. Over here. Okay. Still pretty much in shadows. Okay, there is a little bit better, but now we're super far. So let's zoom in a little bit more. And let me show you how it looks from here. You see now it starts looking a little bit better. So let's get a better angle on this, right? So Control R, gonna move middle mouse to kind of move the view. Zoom in with the middle wheel and kind of rearrange it. Just find an angle that looks a little bit better. One thing that I always suggest is to avoid, you know, the floating plane syndrome of showing the edges. Just give the illusion of a bigger environment by zooming in as much as you can and avoiding showing the, you know, the edges of your scene. You know, I might need to actually move everything over or extend that edge if it's much of a problem. What I'm seeing here, you know, I hope that you see what's happening with the light. You know, the light is going through the side and it's casting a nice beautiful shadow there on the back. You see that it's reflecting the light going through the window, and that's part of what the assignment calls for. As far as the shadow map is pretty much the definition, and we did this on the MAAA demo. Change this to 1024 to get a little bit better resolution on the shadows. Sometimes the shadows tend to, you see that higher, it was very blurry before, now it's getting more defined. So the higher this number, let's put it in 1020, 2020, so that you can see render. You know, see it starts getting more defined, less blurry. So the higher the shadow map, the better the definition and less jagged your shadows will look, okay? And also remember, on nighttime settings, it's perfectly good to use the pitch dark shadows, but for daytime scenes, let's render. You see how much difference it makes changing the color. I just changed it. I said, you know, I just went there, changed the color here, and said, okay. Notice how it starts looking more like daytime shadows, okay? So changing the color of the shadows also affects the way we read the scene. And make sure also here that we don't see the edges of the background plane, okay? So I hope this gets you started. I strongly recommend to go check the resources that I posted in the classroom so that you get a little bit more advanced techniques and also different techniques, because there's pretty good techniques there to learn about, to add on to this short demo that I just created, okay? So I look forward to seeing your projects in the classroom.